Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to look on controlling blood glucose. This is like controlling body temperature, but this time blood glucose, and it's very similar in the mechanism that it uses. So it's very important to control your blood glucose, your sugar levels in your body. Having too much or too little can be very fatal. So if you were to, I'm sorry, look at the top of my board, I couldn't get it off. So if you were to eat food that contains carbohydrates, let me just turn my phone on silent, sorry. Can you read that? Sorry, I actually do apologise. Carbohydrates. It puts glucose into the body from the gut. So you'll eat like bread, for example, and your body will break it down, and in the gut it will put your carbohydrates will be broken down to glucose, and then your gut will put this glucose into your bloodstream. So it puts and if you were to the metabolism of cells, so the chemical reactions in your body, removes glucose. So vigorous exercise, for example. Well, that's a straight line. Vigorous exercise will remove glucose. So eating will put in glucose. Vigorous exercise will remove glucose. These are probably things that you already know. So excess glucagon. Ignore what I just said. Get rid of that out your head. Excess glucose can be stored. Sorry, last time, give me one more chance. Excess glucose can be stored as glycogen in the liver, in the muscles. So glycogen is basically in our keyword vocabulary. Let's do that in green. No, let's do that in just black. So that's blue. Glycogen, spelled like this, is a store for excess glucose. In the liver. This is in the liver or in the muscles. So that's our keyword. The level of glucose in your blood must be kept steady. Obviously, you don't want too much glucose, you don't want too little glucose, and these changes are monitored and controlled by the pancreas. The pancreas is the key organ in controlling blood sugar levels. So let's have that. So basically the pancreas is the one that controls the amount of blood that's in your bloodstream, and it does this by using hormones. And there's two hormones. One is insulin and the other one is glucagon. In a negative feedback, our favourites. We've been talking a lot about negative feedback. These are all negative feedback loops. And I'll show you how it works. So let's draw out our blood stream. This is our bloodstream, and we have blood with too much glucose. And then we have our pancreas here. And the hormones are secreted by the pancreas, and it will secrete the hormone insulin. So if it's too much glucose, it will secrete insulin hormone. And the glucose and the hormone, they'll go along the bloodstream together with the lot of glucose that there is, and then it will come to the liver. This is my gorgeous liver. And the insulin turns, this is by the insulin, this is why it secretes insulin, because the insulin makes the glucose turn into glycogen. Our store. That's that's controlled with insulin. Stores glucose. So it basically gives it orders. It makes the glucose into glycogen, which moves the blood into the liver and not the bloodstream. So the amount of blood in the amount of glucose in the blood is reduced. That says glucose in blood reduced. Really badly. I don't even know if you can see that. Glucose in thing reduced. So then when blood levels are too high, so remember, insulin is a hormone. It makes the liver turn glucose into glycogen, and it removes glucose from the blood. Glucagon Glucogen is the store. Glucogen. When blood levels are too high, insulin is added by the hormones. Now, if the blood levels are too low, we have this bloodstream and we have too little then the pancreas will secrete the other hormone, glucagon. And I know that glucagon and glycogen sound very similar, but don't get them confused. So the pancreas secretes secretes glucagon, and the glucagon and the glucose, even though there's not much of it, will move around the bloodstream to the liver, where the stores, the glucagon, so we'll write this down here, copy this down, glucagon makes liver turn into glucose. No, forget that. Glucagon makes I was right, sorry. I've just had mind space. Makes liver turn glucogen, the store, into glucose. Because do you remember we have that the glycogen is basically stores all the glucose. The glucagon, when it's secreted by the pancreas, it causes the liver to turn it back into glucose. So the glucose is back in the blood, and the blood levels increase, and the blood goes from the liver to the blood, so it's increased. So the way I think of glucagon is that the glucagon is gone. The glucose is gone from the liver. Don't say from the blood. The glucagon is gone from the liver. Think of it as your friend Gluc. He's gone from the liver store. He's gone from the store to the outside the store because his friends need him. His bloodstream needs him. So glucagon from the store into the bloodstream. Perfect. So when the blood levels are too low, the pancreas secretes glucagon. I just confused you. Just pretend I never just said that sentence. When the glucose levels are too slow, the pancreas will secrete glucagon. And when the glucose levels are too high, the pancreas will secrete insulin. And it all depends on whether it's being stored or whether it's being taken out of its store and converted back into the bloodstream. It's a very clever mechanism if you think about it. Who likes my fluffy socks that are in the camera frame right now? Because I know what I do. Now we're going to just talk about diabetes. Diabetes is basically a condition where you can't control your sugar level. So the process that we just went through, people with diabetes, they can't do this process very successfully. There is 2 types of diabetes, which you probably know, type 1 and type 2, and they are slightly different. But they both basically mean you can't control your blood sugar level, which is very not good. It is a mess, the top of it, isn't it? I swear, my whiteboards start out quite clean at the beginning of the bits, usually. Once I bleach them. Okay. So, type 1 diabetes. They are slightly different. So, if you write down type 1. So, type 1 diabetes is when the pancreas produces So basically, the pancreas produces little or no insulin, and as you can tell by the process we just went through, this is not good because if your pancreas can't produce insulin, you can't convert the glucose in your bloodstream into glycogen for it to be stored, so you'll have too much glucose in your bloodstream. So this means that blood glucose levels can rise to a level that can kill them. So glucose, because you can't convert it. The insulin is the key to converting the glucose into the store. You need a thing called insulin therapy for type 1 diabetes. So this means several injections a day. If you know anyone with diabetes type 1, you may have seen them take several injections a day of insulin, especially after meal times. Because obviously after a meal you would have had a lot of carbohydrates, so your level of glucose will increase in your bloodstream, and your pancreas don't produce insulin, so you need to inject insulin in order to store it. Otherwise you'd have too much glucose in your bloodstream, and that's when there's a problem. So these injections of insulin are very important to keep the balance that normally would happen on its own, but if you have diabetes you need the insulin therapy in order to keep the glucose level steady. So it makes sure the glucose is removed from the blood quickly once the food has been digested. So as soon as the food has been digested, it removes the glucose from the blood quickly to stop the levels getting too high, and it's actually an effective treatment. So the amount of insulin that needs to be injected depends on your diet. So basically the insulin therapy depends on your diet, obviously, because if you eat a lot of carbohydrates and you eat a lot of food, you're going to need to inject yourself more often, because your glucose levels will be a lot higher and you'll need to inject insulin. Whereas if you it will also depend it depends on your diet and how active, because if you're very active, if you did a lot of activity, like exercise, vigorous exercise, you will release glucose from your bloodstream naturally, so you won't need as many injections. So it does depend on your diet and your exercise. If you exercise more, there'll be less glucose in your body because of your metabolism, your chemical reaction of cells. So people with type 1 diabetes also have to think about limiting the intake of food. So they have to think about food and like less carbohydrates. So they have to think about what sort of food they're eating and make sure there's not many carbohydrates in it. For example, sugar would cause glucose to rise rapidly, and exercise would remove glucose. So rise rapidly, pretty much what we just said. Okay, and then we have type 2. So this is when a person becomes resistant to their own insulin. So this is slightly different because type 1 diabetes, your pancreas doesn't produce any insulin basically, or it produces very little insulin. But in type 2 diabetes, your pancreas produces insulin. It produces the right amount of insulin. However, the person with type 2 diabetes is resistant to this insulin. So they produce insulin in the body, but the body cells do not respond to it properly, which can cause the person's blood sugars to rise to a dangerous level. So they would actually produce insulin. It's just sending the information to the cells, and the cells actually storing it, which that person cannot do properly. And being overweight can affect this. Like, for example, obesity is a risk factor. If you're overweight, it can increase your chance of type 2 diabetes. You can do this again by controlling and regular exercise. So that's the end of that pretty much. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If there's anything that you guys are unsure about on this, I can go into more depth on any of it if needs be, so let me know. Thank you for watching.